So generally the second part of our session is a little bit of a wisdom talk, and hopefully you're not too fed up with me. You've seen quite a lot of me over the last week. We had our Cherishing Our Parents last Thursday. Saturday we had Gratitude. Tuesday we are moving on to a new subject, which is to do with how to raise our children to benefit from positive values in life. And the reason that they all seem to be rather connected with family values at the moment is because I'm working my way through a series of values and virtues which come from Buddhist scriptural sources, which are a set of 38 values, which start with very basic ones, mundane ones in life, and move to more esoteric ones. And they move step by step through the 38 with the idea that wherever you jump in on the 38 blessings, as they're called, then if you jump in at one step on the staircase, then it will lead you to the next step upwards. So no matter where you start, then it will lead you towards something which will gradually help you towards a sense of enlightenment in life. And at the moment we're working our way through those values to do with family harmony. Last time, number 11 was to do with looking after our parents, having filial piety, having a sense of respect and gratitude towards our parents, that sort of thing. And the next one in the series is to do with, for those of you who are parents or considering parenthood, what's the best way to bring up children in order to avoid perhaps getting little monsters as a result. And in this connection, the teachings from our main temple in Thailand have gradually evolved over the years. In the old days, they used to be quite strict, rather Victorian with children, and the reason for that is that even within the very traditional Buddhist scriptures, they usually are fairly sort of unrelenting with their children. There's a sort of tough love message which comes from the Jātaka stories about spare the rod and spoil the child. But these days you might find that this is rather inappropriate because in most places the laws have changed since I was a child anyway. No more corporal punishment and that sort of thing. And in the same way, the temple teachings have become gentler, you may be pleased to hear. And in the way to express your concern for your children now is by spending more time with them. Yes. So you might wonder, yes, the two books which I have up on the screen, on the left is the book from 2007, The Warm-Hearted Family. At that time, they still were pretty keen on punishing your children if they did wrong things. By the following year, 2008, they moved on to spending more time with your children and cutting out the punishment bit. Yeah. So this is where it's at. This is where the knowledge is at in our temple at the moment. So I've had to do a little bit of a rewrite, and I hope the message of bringing up one's children will be a little bit more in line with positive psychology these days. So you might think, well, what's a monk got to share with us? Monks are the ones who have opted out of raising their own families after all, so without any skin in the game, probably we're wasting our time listening to a monk talking about these sorts of subjects. But within Buddhism, the actual definition of who might qualify as our children is quite a wide definition. Of course, it includes children born of our own flesh, but even for those of us who have a lot of, let's say, staff living on our property, our children would include anyone who's born on our property. So if you think about employees, families, if you're an employer, then it would include them too. We would need to have the same sense of concern for them. It might include those we have adopted. And as far as monks are concerned, they would even include those who are our students. So the same sort of concern and wish to cherish those who we are nurturing in their upbringing should apply to all those categories. So by the word children, in fact, it's a very broad definition. It even includes those who monks might have to look after. So, the idea of bringing up children would be that, apart from bringing up children to be physically strong and healthy, that we would also instill good habits in the children who we look after. And what we'll be looking at today is much to do with the qualities that we would hope to instill in children who we are responsible for. And generally, there would be 3 qualities which we would like to see in any children. Purity, so like not selfish, that sort of thing. Wisdom, and also compassion. But exactly how you get those quite lofty ideals into your heart and mind generally comes via much more basic qualities. And the sort of thing I'm talking about, in order to reach those things like purity, wisdom, and compassion, are much more basic things, especially coming down to things like learning what is the difference between need and want, or learning moderation through the way we deal with very basic necessities in life, like the clothes we wear, the food we eat, the accommodation we use, or the medicine we use to treat any illnesses that we have. So the way we would intervene with children is actually at a much more basic level than those quite esoteric qualities that I started off by talking about. For example, even from a time when your children are still in the cradle, the way you feed your children can affect their habits. For example, some people just let their children cry when they're hungry and ignore them completely. So what would children be learning from that experience from an early age? Just let them cry until they cry themselves to sleep. Hungry or not, they get the message pretty early in life that communication is a waste of time. Yeah? Or if you wait until they make a lot of noise and then feed them, then they learn that to shout the house down is the only way you get attention in life. Or you can take the lazy approach, which is just to stick a bottle in their mouth and leave them so they always have something to eat, in which case they would learn that happiness comes from eating a lot, for example. So one way or another, if you, from an early age, let's say you respect regular, predictable meal times, then you get a much less temperamental child, even from a time that they're not yet talking to you. So even from working with the basic things, the needs and wants in life, you actually produce habits in your children by the maybe unintentional decisions which you make about how you raise your children. So it can be as simple as that. It's to do with habit formation, in other words. Apart from the habits we instill, then we also set an example by the unspoken things that our children see us do. Especially the way we speak, the way we use our time, the standards of cleanliness that we set, or how organized we are. For example, We've already studied a little bit about speaking effectively, but let's say if we speak to strangers with the same care and politeness and truthfulness and good intentions that we would speak to our friends, if our children see that sort of example set, then they would also want to follow our example. Not like you speak to your friends one way and just shout at strangers or something. Yeah. Use of time. I'm not saying I advocate helicopter parenting, but where there's no free time left at all, but having clear or predictable schedules is very helpful for a child to have a sense of the world being a place which is well ordered and somehow something you can be in control of. A third way to do with cleanliness, as well as for their own health and social acceptability in general, learning to be clean, whether it be showering, the way they look after their hair or their dental health, washing of the hands. Personal hygiene habits provide an important source of self-esteem for a child. If not in their own eyes, then certainly in the eyes of others. And last but not least, how organized we are. Children who are unable to organize themselves, especially time-wise, will find it very hard to work as a team or to plan things in advance in their future if they're just left completely to their own devices. So consciously or unconsciously, children pick up habits from the examples they see. And this is why it's not good enough for parents to say, do what I say, not what I do. One of the things which really instills habits from an early age is a sense of responsibility. And there's a teaching in the Buddhist scriptures which goes something like, one reaps the fruit of the seed one sows. Lovely fruits come from lovely actions. Ugly fruits come from ugly actions. So creating a safe space by which children can learn the consequences of their actions in a low-stakes environment is a good way for them to learn responsibility from an early age. So if a child has done something wrong, the parent should avoid taking the side of the child. So they should be clear about, like, it's the behavior, not you. And parents need to be able to dare to discipline the children if they have done something wrong in an appropriate way. Usually what children do that might be wrong starts out as something unintentional, which would be rather blundering and sort of easy to detect, and might be like throwing down a cup or pinching a friend's arm or causing an angry scene. And if you can correct what they've done wrong at the mistake stage, then it won't escalate into something more devious, which is harder to correct at a later time. And also, if you need to make some sort of course adjustment, you need to get them pretty soon after they've done it, because children have quite short-term memories concerning things they've done and the possible outcomes of them. So there's no point in punishing a child for something they did yesterday. If they become accustomed to certain bad things which they've done, then it's going to be much harder to change that later on. So, a parent has sometimes been compared to an actor who needs to switch roles at the drop of a hat. And you might think being a parent is just like about being nice to your children or something, but in fact there are as many as 4 different roles which a parent might need to play. The first is as a teacher to the child. You might think going to school they would already get that, but many things to do with personal habits, you are still their first teacher, because you're their the first place they start learning from, even before they go to school. So as a first teacher, you need to foster what is best in them, to give them the right outlook in life. The second thing is you might need to be the moral conscience for your child, to give them the logic of integrity in their life. Within Buddhism, they talk a lot about positive energy being something called merit, whereas negative energy would be something called demerit. So within Buddhist culture, for children it's very useful to talk about the difference between those, how it feels for themselves and for the other people on the receiving end of good or bad actions. Within other cultures it might be slightly different, but the aim should still be for the children to do things which are good or charitable or compassionate as regularly as possible, so that they can start to distinguish between what is right or wrong behaviors. If there are things which are not up to scratch, then you need to think about what sort of diplomatic sanctions you might inflict upon your child, because these days you don't get to punish them anymore. And if the parents of the child can be on the same page in this, then it's much simpler for the children to understand. So what would be the proportionate rewards or punishments for any particular level of good or bad things which the children might do. Withdrawing prizes is more humane than giving punishments, which should really only be used as a last resort. So if there's a clear economy of justice for the child, it prevents the parents lashing out in anger, which is generally a bad idea. If you are objective and you don't take the side of your child, then it will avoid you spoiling the children or indulging them unduly. And at the same time, the children have done something wrong, then the parents shouldn't cover up for them. Third role is that of the nurturer, which is sort of bringing forth the best in the child through a loving atmosphere of trust and having a safe environment within the family home. If they do good things, then there needs to be an environment by which they are applauded and praised. And even if the children are at the point where they are leaving home or whatever, then we need to be able to accept that too, and not hold them back. Part of nurturing them to become independent is allowing them to do that and giving encouragement to them, even if it's from a distance, as an adult. Lastly, a spiritual guide to the child means that we need to be able to offer wise counsel to them and foster family unity through those spiritual values. If we're able to practice all 4 of these roles, then children will thrive within the wider community. Traditionally within Buddhism, there are different elements to good upbringing which come to us again from the Sigalovada Sutta, which you have heard from me a few times already. Not allowing children to err into unwholesome behaviors, establishing them in wholesome behaviors, and also keeping a close eye on the sort of friends our children have. So encourage them to avoid bad things, doing only good things, Some of this is by what we say to them, but often it's by the sort of example we set for them. Sometimes if the children ask too much of us, instead of saying no, it's better to say, let me think about that. It's a sort of softer approach. And then maybe later on they'll learn that that is what they've asked for is not convenient. As for children's friends, generally you find that all the favorite friends are the real troublemakers, which one day will come back to haunt you. And this means that as a sort of 360-degree parent, you need to be aware not only of what's going on in your child's life, but also what's going on in their friends' lives as well. And one way to keep tabs on that is by having maybe play dates regularly, whereby you can sort of listen in on what's going on between your children and their friends, so you know the sort of influences which you are dealing with. Apart from that, also very much recommended is to have at least one meal a day when the whole family sit down together. I don't know if people still do that anymore. They do? Oh, there's still hope then. Because there's a sort of TV dinner thing which has sort of devolved into each person's got their own private TV in their own room, and no one even speaks to each other anymore, which is a sort of recipe for disaster. So having a meal together once a day is really helpful because if your children have done something wrong, let's say they have started shoplifting or smoking or telling lies, generally there will be some indications of guilt on their face, which you will notice in the beginning, and then those indications will become less and less obvious. So if you can get them early on, then that is something which you are in a position to do if you are eating together once a day. Yeah. Apart from that, there is also the gentle art of something known as polite conversation, which you can also get from eating together. And some topics for conversation starters that might be useful in order to sort of raise the sort of ethical issues might be things like standing on one's own 2 feet financially, the dangers of peer pressure, or the real dangers of dangerous living. Some people, parents who have led exemplary lives, are completely mystified by the dangers of things like intoxicants and addiction, addictive drugs, that sort of thing. These days you can't afford to not know about these things. And there are sort of a lot of websites these days which are very helpful both for parents and for children to learn about possible services or advice concerning intoxicants. And one of those which I can recommend is that from the FCD.org, Freedom from Chemical Dependency website. But yes, there are real dangers in these substances which you can't afford to underestimate, unfortunately, anymore. Coming back to this topic of having an idea what your children's friends are like, I will finish today with a little story which comes from the Buddhist scriptures, which is to do with the perils of letting your children associate with friends of bad character. And as with many of these so-called Jātaka tales or previous birth stories of the Buddha, It is a story concerning animals. So it's an animal. Animals are the characters in the story. And this one is to do with reptiles. It comes from Jātaka number 457, I think. Sorry, no, 141, the Godha Jātaka. And it tells a story about a whole family who was brought to ruin by their children associating with the wrong sort of reptiles. And the story goes like this. With me so far? And the animals can actually talk in the story as well. Okay. So you can take it as a story, or you can take it as a previous birth. It's up to you. But the moral of the story remains the same. So it's a story about a family of geckos. And geckos are like the smaller ones, and the iguanas, which are like quite big ones. Okay. And at the outset, the babies of both families started out about the same size. So baby gecko, baby iguana, about the same size. But the rate at which they grow is rather different. And for the purpose of our story, we'll say that geckos are a slightly better character. Okay. So, the little gecko and the little iguanas used to play together. And the father of the gecko, so like the smaller one, says to his son, don't play games with the iguanas because those lot are of a different grade. The baby gecko answered back saying, oh dad, don't be such a snob, we're all lizards after all. And the father said, it's not just that we are lizards, but we also have a different physique and different habits. And if you keep associating with them, then one day danger will come to our door. However, the father knew that his son would be too stubborn to take his advice and foresaw that disaster would come to them one day. Not just to his family, but the whole family of geckos. So consequently, the father gecko set to work digging an escape route out of the back of their burrow. And before long, it was just as the father predicted. The baby iguana grew so fast and strong, but the gecko only grew a little at a time. And where the baby gecko weighed only a few 100 grams, the baby iguana was starting to weigh in at several kilos. And now when they engaged in play fighting together, like they had used to do, then the gecko was starting to get seriously hurt. And the iguana didn't realize its own strength. So it lost patience with his friend, the geckos, and betrayed the location of their burrow to some hunters who were passing by. And the hunters pushed dry grass into the burrow of the geckos and set fire to it, sending smoke deep inside, which is how you catch geckos, okay? And they get enough smoke in their burrow, then they all come running out and you can catch them. So the baby geckos all came running out and were captured by the hunters. And all the rest of the family suffered the same fate. However, only the father, smelling the smoke, knew immediately that his prediction had come true, and he escaped via the back burrow that he had dug for himself. And the sort of the conclusion to the story which the Buddha gave was that those characters in the previous story, or the story of the previous birth, in this present lifetime had the baby iguana, so the big tough bully one, had been a monk who had tried to sort of fragment and deharmonize the monastic community in the present lifetime, whereas the baby gecko was one monk that had associated with that one, whereas the father one was the Buddha himself. Yeah. So to finish off with today, I would just like to leave you with a few thoughts, especially for those of you who are new to meditation today, which is that if you enjoy meditation today and you see the potential to improve upon it further, I would encourage you to meditate a little every day if you can. you can try to find 20 minutes for yourself to meditate at a time in the day at home when you find it convenient, or you have enough energy to do so, or when your home is relatively peaceful and you won't be interrupted. So it might be first thing in the morning if you're a morning sort of person, and that will set you up nicely for the day. Or if you're a person who has problems sleeping anyway, it might be last thing at night. Instead of lying awake and worrying about it, you could be meditating, settle yourself down, and then go to sleep afterwards. Or it could even be in your lunch break if you have a stressful job. But if you find 20 minutes a day, then little by little, if you do that every day, then you'll find that meditation becomes easier, and you can go further within the 20 minutes than you could before. And you can extend the time if you feel you would like to. If you find difficulty remembering how to meditate, there is an app for that, known as Mind Gem, which you can download onto your mobile phone and listen to audio instructions for meditation from various monks in our tradition, who have different approaches and different lengths of meditation which you can choose from. And there's even a timer on that which you can time your meditation as well, so that you have a soothing tone to bring you out of your meditation at the end of half an hour or whatever. Here at the meditation center, it's good to meditate sometimes as a group, because it's moral support, and also just meditating along with other people helps us to establish a sense of discipline. There are classes here on Tuesdays and Thursdays in person. Generally on the Tuesday it's a half an hour meditation, on the Thursday it's 45 minutes. That's the only real difference. And for those who like to meditate from the comfort of their home, but with some sense of meditating along with others, every Saturday via Zoom, there is an online meditation between 7 and 8 p.m, which you can follow along with. There's a meditation and a wisdom talk as within that hour schedule. And apart from that, we also have once a month something known as the full moon meditation, which is a little bit of a ceremony as part of the meditation as well, usually candle lighting. The one coming up in May, which is on the 15th of May, aligns with something known as the Buddha's birthday. So we actually will have a big candle lighting ceremony here, which you can join with in person, or you can join online, depending on what you like. But we will have a ceremony outside as well as part of that, with lighting candle lanterns outside, which should be fun, the sort of thing you might even like to bring your family along to. For those young men who might like to try out being a monk, there's the opportunity to do that in the month of June, either for 4 weeks or, if at a pinch, 2 weeks. And I believe the latest word on that is that the venue will be Denmark, our centre in Denmark, where you can become a monk and camp and lead a disciplined life for 2 weeks, to try that out for yourself, as happens for once a year normally, but we have not been able to hold it for obvious reasons for the last 2 years, so we are coming back to that activity again. And the next weekend meditation retreat coming up here, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, will be between the 8th and 10th of July, and at the moment we are looking into alternative venues to have a change of scene for those who maybe been on lots of meditation retreats here already and are looking for a change of scene.